can't change things that we're unaware of. But one of the great things is, as long as you're alive, you can improve. As long as you're alive, you can improve. Just like as long as you're alive, you can get worse. So the question is, which direction do we get to go? And it's really based upon which direction we choose.
Welcome to the Wheel With It podcast with your host, Devon. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. My name is Devon Wieters, and today we have Dr. Nigel Brayer on the show. He is a natural bladder doctor. That's all I'm going to say because he explains it better than I do. But he's got some very helpful tips if you struggle with incontinence in any type of way. And I wanted to have him on because that's a common issue in the disability community. So I hope you find this one helpful. Here's my conversation with Dr. Nigel Brayer. Welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. I am Devon Wieters, and today we have Dr. Nigel Brayer on the podcast with us today, or Breyer, is it Breyer on the podcast with us today?
Yes.
And he's going to talk about an issue that is very near and dear to the disability community and a lot of women in general, and people in general. So how are you today, Nigel?
I am great. Thanks for the opportunity, Devon. I look forward to our conversation today.
You are so welcome. First of all, tell us about you, and then we will get started.
Sure. So, Devon, I am a natural health physician. I've trained as a chiropractor, acupuncturist, functional medicine practitioner for the last, 28 years or so. I've had the opportunity of treating, probably hundreds of thousands of people over the years, which I'm so grateful for. So I just have the opportunity to share some experience and share some insight into the health. Looking forward to it.
So tell us about the specific issue that you're here to talk about today and how you came to want to fix that issue.
Sure. Today we're going to talk about urinary incontinence, which is simply put is the inability to hold your bladder. I get asked this question frequently from people when I do podcasts and speak to clients and patients. Is they say, what promoted you to specialize in women's bladder health? Is that some dying passion of yours? And the answer is, it was not a dying passion of mine. It's like a lot of
dying passion. We don't judge around here, but a dying passion if it was. But
so it's one of those, I'll call it a happy accident. Is I've been in the healthcare field a long time, and when I see a problem that keeps reappearing consistently, I feel this once or twice, it's not such a big deal, but when things keep coming up in your face repeatedly, that's my challenge to say, hey, the universe wants me to put my energy into trying to figure this out. And so how it came about initially was, and as Devon and you and I spoke earlier before the show, is my wife and I have 4 children. My youngest is 7. And several months after my youngest child was born, my wife really stopped doing a lot of the things that she enjoyed. Initially, I thought maybe it was a postpartum depression issue, or maybe it was just a fatigue issue from having a young child. It comes out after much discussion over many months that she was avoiding many of the things we enjoyed doing as a family because she couldn't hold her bladder. She would laugh or cough or sneeze or jump or get out of the car or off the chair, and she would have bladder leakage. And she hid it very well, but she really started avoiding many of the things that we did together. And so I did what most people, I believe, would do, is I tried to help her and try to figure it out. And I referred her to a friend of mine who's a physical therapist who worked on health floor issues for ladies. And she saw her, and she went through the protocol of treatment, which took 6 or 7 months, and it really didn't help her much at all. I would say maybe 30% would be the max. So that led us to the next thing of saying, okay, what's the next step? So we went to her OBGYN, her gynecologist doctor, and they did an exam and said, hey, all of the normal anatomy is working and it's there. We can offer you some different medication or some possible surgeries to resolve it. And we're not a big medication family just because of our beliefs in chemicals and such. So that wasn't a good option for her and for us. And so it was really limiting because we kept seeking, saying, well, other options are available, and there was none. And so, lo and behold, again, as I've been in practice a long time, so I started reviewing some of my patient files of ladies who've had children, and they do a paperwork in my office, which is called a review of systems, which means we review a whole bunch of different body systems to get an understanding of what's going on with them. And as I researched through my files, I noticed a lot of ladies who had children, and even ones who didn't, checked off the box for urinary incontinence. And it's funny because even though I went back several years with my patient database, is I never really noticed it before or paid much attention, primarily because I didn't treat that condition at my office at that time. So as those patients came in for other reasons, I asked them about the incontinence that they'd checked off years prior. And interestingly enough, they still had the same issue, and it was continuing worsening. And their primary management was as they used diapers, pads, which was kind of heartening. So what I did is I started researching and taking a deeper dive into the anatomy and the physiology, which means how the body is put together and how it works. And something struck me very interesting that almost nobody that I'd noticed had looked into, and that's called what's called the innervation of the bladder. So innervation means the nerve supply and how the nerves communicate with the brain. And what I'd found is the valve that controls the bladder that stops our body from urinating is controlled almost exclusively, about 70%, by the autonomic nervous system. So Devon, what that means is that when a person is controlling their bladder, they're only controlling approximately 30% of that valve. So the question becomes, what's the other 70%? And the other 70% is autonomically controlled. So that means autonomic meaning what beats your heart, what digests your food. You don't have a lot of conscious control over it. And it's really affected by what's called your unconscious tone patterns, which means the brain, the stress, things that affect our body in kind of a sideways pattern. So I developed over several, probably 2 or 3 years, I would say, I started experimenting with different types of treatment on these patients using acupuncture and biofeedback and a specialized exercise that I developed. And what I found is the true change came when we started to retrain the autonomic nervous system using that kind of three-prong approach, the biofeedback, the acupuncture retraining, and then the special exercise called the swaggle. And we had an amazing outcome. We were seeing over 90% resolution rate with people with urinary incontinence.
That is like incredible. So tell us what, for people who don't know, for people
Sure.
who haven't been in all kinds of therapy since they were young enough to remember, tell us what biofeedback is. And then I honestly don't know this. Tell us what the squiggle is.
Sure. So biofeedback is just really a $50 word for starting to have true awareness between your body and yourself. So just think about how often we live our life and we're totally unaware of what's going on inside of our bodies, right? So we're brushing our teeth, or we're wiping the counter, or we're walking to whatever. So we're really unaware of how our body's working. We just make these assumptions. And so that happens oftentimes with our bladder. Most people are totally unaware of how their bladder works or even their body works until it starts to fall apart. So what biofeedback is using special techniques to help us bring our consciousness, meaning our mind, towards what our body's doing. And so just like practicing how to write or practicing how to walk or whatever a person wants to achieve, is the more you do something consciously, you build what are called nerve fibers, and the nerves start to build stronger connections. That's the same reason most people would do any sort of therapy, whether it be physical therapy or cognitive therapy, whatever it is. So you're using these patterns to build new patterns for certain purposes. So the key in incontinence is we're building awareness patterns of the bladder and the brain, And then we're removing interference that's created from everything from childbirth to birth trauma to stress overuse or hormones or chemicals in our body. All these things can interfere with how the connections work. Does that make sense?
Yes. And what is the squiggle?
So the squiggle is an exercise I designed. It incorporates two things. So everyone's probably heard of the Kegel exercise. So what the Kegel is, it's more or less, imagine you're going to the bathroom and then you stop going to the bathroom and then you start again. What you're doing is you're contracting the muscles of your perineum, which is near the bottom of the groin. And that helps also close the sphincter of the bladder to reduce leakage. But what we found is everyone makes the assumption that it's just loss of strength that reduces bladder flow, but it's often not loss of strength. It's often because of too much scar tissue or loss of integrity of the tissue. So what a squiggle does, it's another part of the biofeedback mechanism, is where we're at the same time stretching and strengthening the perineum and the valve and bladder control. So the squiggle uses a technique where you squat deep down and feel a deep stretch in the inner part of the groin and the thigh. And at the same time, you're doing a Kegel where you're squeezing the sphincter or the perineum, like you're stopping yourself from going to the bathroom. And you do that consistently and you're rebuilding flexibility in the pelvis as well as strength in the pelvis. So it's a twofer type activity that strengthens and stretches at the same time.
What would you recommend? First of all, what are some of the signs of an overactive bladder besides the obvious? And two, what would you recommend people do to get this solved?
Sure. So the first thing is there's a couple different types of incontinence. And the only reason we differentiate it is one has more of a physical origin, one has more of a neurologic origin. But let's be honest, you can't have one without the other. So there's called stress incontinence, which means that the pressure is too great for the valve to hold it. Therefore, the valve lets go and leakage occurs. The second is called urge incontinence. That means that once you start thinking about something, or if you have a preemptive idea that you're going to be using the bathroom, before you even get there, the nerves start to send input and cause the bladder valves to relax or let go. It's like a quiver. So why are we talking about this? Well, we're usually a combination of both. So if people want to go on my website, it's drnigelbrayer.com. There's a simple quiz on that site that helps them to see what type of incontinence they have. But it also helps us direct to see what areas we should focus more on. Should we focus more on the strength and flexibility, or should we focus more on the nervous system? And again, in my experience, it's both. So the next question you had is, what can people start doing? So the first thing I encourage people to start doing, and this is going to sound a little odd because it's not directly relating to the bladder, but it relates to all of your health in general, is I have people do what's called a food/mood journal. And people say, well, I don't want to journal anything. Well, journaling allows us to pay attention. So let's go back to biofeedback, is we can't change things that we're unaware of. Does that make sense? So I use the silly analogy is if you had a friend who was totally broke financially and they were asking for your counsel and said, hey, Devon, I'm totally broke. Can you help me figure out why I'm broke? The first thing you'd probably help them do is you'd say, or you'd ask them, what do you spend your money on? And if they said, well, I don't know, you'd probably say, well, why don't we pay attention? So that's really a journal. So why don't we pay attention to what you're spending your money on? So after a week or two of people paying attention, they can look at it and say, oh my gosh, every day I'm buying a $9 cup of coffee. Well, that might be a great place to start saving some money, right? So the same thing goes with our health. So the food journal, since we eat so regularly, it helps us make some correlations between what we put in our body and how our body works. And I call it a mood journal too, because I encourage people to write down generally how they feel each day. Am I happy? Am I grumpy? Am I moody? Am I whatever the words might be? So why we do this is because when you start paying attention to our food and our mood, we can also pay attention to our leakage patterns. So here's an example. is people will eat certain foods or drink certain beverages, and they'll notice that they go to the bathroom more often or they have less control. That's one thing. Or they might notice, hey, I'm upset or I'm grumpy or whatever it might be, and I have more of an issue. So the purpose of all that is to start paying attention and correlating with your issues related to your bladder. Now, what does that do? It allows you to start saying, hey, what can I change right here and right now to start making some impact on that issue? And the first thing people will start noticing is how their diet is going to affect their bladder. Colorants, preservatives, chemicals, nation, those things are all irritants to linings of the bladder, lining of the GI tract, lining of the blood vessels. So all of those things can influence, and they're super easy to start. It doesn't cost you anything. All it does is just start to pay attention. And what that does, and that's the first step in our protocol also, is then it opens the door that once you start doing actual treatment for this, you're going to be that much more effective because you're starting to realize how everything we put in our body affects how our body works.
What is the connection between overactive bladder and trauma?
So trauma does several different things. So you have the initial trauma. So let's just talk about a mother who's had birth, or there's a whole myriad of different reasons we could have trauma in that region. But trauma creates physical injury, which has to heal. That can create either tension via scar tissue, okay, or it can create loss of function due to damage. So you've got the physical component of trauma. Now, the physical is one thing. So I liken it this way, is Devon, if you came and you punched me in the arm really hard, you're going to bruise my arm, right? So I'm going to have a bruise. My body's going to work on repairing that. Maybe a scar resides there, but I go on and I live my life. So that's one part of trauma, is the physical component. Now, the emotional component might be a whole different can of worms. So now imagine I had some emotional response to that trauma. Maybe, who knows, maybe I felt scared, or I felt threatened, or I felt betrayed, or whatever the other emotional issues. Those things that affect our mind, they affect our body also. So full circle, think about the autonomic nervous system for a second. The autonomic nervous system is responding to unconscious things that are going on in our life. Emotions affect our unconscious patterns. So back to the bladder is you have the physical trauma, but the emotional trauma is what mostly affects the autonomic nervous system. That can go on for an entire lifetime. And that's where, and that's why, in my experience, that most incontinence doesn't get fully resolved, because it's not really affecting the unconscious patterns that can come from trauma, that can come from birth, can come from guilt, can come from all these other things. Now, people don't have to go through 57 years of Freudian therapy to figure that out. The goal is understanding that it influences us. And understanding it then allows you to start to plant in new patterns over time to override the old patterns that are there. Does that make sense?
Yes. And what is like a success story that you've had that you would want to share?
Sure. A success story is, I had a patient, she came in, this was a couple of years ago now. She had heard about me getting great success with the urinary incontinence from other patients and friends and whatever else. And it took her a long time to finally come in and meet with me, but we did. And I asked her, I said, well, why has it been so long since you came in? She goes, my case is very unique. I said, well, what happened? She goes, well, I had end-stage ovarian cancer that metastasized, which means it spread to my bones. She goes, I've had so much surgery in my pelvis. I've had my uterus removed, my ovaries removed. I've had some of the musculature removed. I've had radiation. She goes, I've had years worth of chemical, radiation, and physical trauma in that area. And she goes, I just feel like there's no hope for me. So what we did with her is we did the exact same protocol that I do in my ironclad bladder program. We assessed where she was at. We laid out the protocol. We had her do it 5 to 9 times a day because of the severity. Based upon the severity of the protocol, takes between 3 and 5 minutes. We had her doing it 9 times a day. And within 5 months, she was 85% improved. She went from using 8 to 10 adult diapers a day. Now just imagine the cost of that, by the way.
That is crazy. 8 to 10 a day.
8 to 10 a day. She had an auto ship that she was spending over $350 a month in adult diapers just for those.
That's crazy.
So over that 5-month period, we had around 80% improvement. I still see her for other reasons to this day, and she's maintained that. But one of the great things is, as long as you're alive, you can improve. So people will come and talk to me and say, "Hey, doc, has it gone too far for me?" And the answer is, as long as you're alive, you can improve, just like as long as you're alive, you can get worse. So the question is, which direction do we get to go? And it's really based upon which direction we choose. If we do nothing, things have to worsen. That's assured, because life is progressive, right? It's like a tree, everything ages. But if you take steps, it may not get perfect. That's the big thing. People say, "Hey, if it can't be perfect, I don't want it." What you got to remember is life's not perfect. If you take steps, it can improve. And most of the time, it's dramatic improvement. Okay. But no matter what, it's going to change. And this was a good example of that lady I shared, because she thought she was hopeless. She had so much trauma in that area. It surprised me. But the body's capacity to heal is absolutely amazing. But what happens is, as people, we often listen to the doctors, or we give up and say, "Okay, we can't change. It's been too long," or "My circumstance is different than everybody else's." All these different reasons we justify. I'd say that's the biggest barrier to people getting the help, is they give up and then they give in.
Yeah, that's really good. So where can people go to get this program? How much does it cost? All that stuff.
Sure. So the first things I have people do is go to my website, Dr. So Dr. Nigel Brayer, Brayer.com. So April 17th, we have a free webinar coming up. It's based upon menopause, but it's not fully menopause. It's really for everybody. But obviously, menopausal women tend to have more of this issue than non. So we have a free seminar coming up. What that seminar is going to do is educate, give people information about their body, about the systems that affect their body, and give them some super simple tools for the next step to start to help their incontinence. And then at the end of that seminar, we're going to be starting our 30-day Bladder Restore program. And that Restore program is going to be a special offer at the end of that seminar. I forget what its cost is. It's somewhere in the hundreds, maybe $200. I'm not exactly sure right now, but that's going to be for the 30-day doctor-led program, which will be led by me. So we've got several steps. The first step is to help people understand, take the steps they can right now. And then the next step would be to do the 30-day program to fully get that bladder control back.
And what exactly is your area of medicine?
3 things. So I was trained neurologically as a chiropractor. So as a chiropractor, you learn first neurology, physiology. So the nervous system is the big component. That's kind of what allowed me to go into the bladder as a specialty, because it's so neurologically based. And I'm also trained in acupuncture. So I've been practicing acupuncture for the last many years. And then also functional medicine, which means simply this is correlating and helping people understand is every system works together with itself. So you can have a neurologist that works with the nerves. You can have a cardiologist that works with the heart. You can have a gastrointestinal doctor that works with the GI and the stomach. But all of our body is one big complex organism. So functional medicine, what it does is it's study and treatment of using the whole body. Everything affects everything. So instead of breaking people down into little pieces, your hand, your knee, your toe, your stomach, your brain, what's looking at the big picture? And functional medicine is the big picture of healthcare.
Where can people follow you on social media, make an appointment with you, all that stuff?
Sure. So all those things, they can go on drnigelbrayer.com. Everything that they'll need to get in contact is there. We have our Facebook group, Instagram. So just type my name in and they'll be able to find whatever they would like.
That's amazing, and we'll have all those links in the show notes for you. And thank you so much for being here. And comment, subscribe, follow us on social media, hit the bell if you're on YouTube or Spotify, and we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys. So I really like that conversation. I hope you did too. Please be sure to follow him on social media. We'll have all the links in the show notes. And be sure to follow me on social media. I'll have all those links in the show notes. And thank you for watching, and we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to follow the show and our guests on social media and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you'll get notified when we upload new episodes. See you next time.